In the middle of the Oryx Holdings Awards, Anderson walked up behind his wife's chair and poured his entire bowl of hot soup directly over her body. Gasps cut through the room. His mistress smiled. Then he said, "Don't concern yourself with this." He sneered. "I was just removing a rotten bug from the company." 300 guests went silent. Mia lifted her chin and said nothing. Then the main doors opened. A man stepped in and paused, taking in the scene. No one noticed him. No one knew he had been watching, quietly, patiently for over 6 months. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. New York, Canada, maybe South Africa or Jamaica. We want to know. The chandeliers above the grand Oryx ballroom threw warm gold light across the room, catching the rims of champagne flutes and the shimmer of evening gowns. 300 of the city's most respected people had gathered for the Oryx Holdings annual awards gala. Laughter moved between tables draped in white linen. Mia had arrived early. She sat at a round table near the center of the room with 4 of her colleagues, and she was laughing. She wore a fitted burgundy gown, her hair styled carefully, her jewelry simple and deliberate. She looked like a woman who belonged exactly where she was sitting. Anderson walked in from the entrance with Maigret on his arm, moving through the room the way he always moved through rooms, like the space had been arranged in advance for his arrival. Maigret wore a gold dress and kept her chin slightly elevated. Anderson's hand rested on her back, steering her from one side of the room to the other, stopping at tables, shaking hands, accepting congratulations for an evening that hadn't even started yet. Then he saw Mia, laughing, relaxed, bright, surrounded by colleagues who were clearly enjoying her company. She hadn't seen him yet. Something shifted in his face. The specific, irrational anger of a man who expected to find a woman broken and instead found her whole. He had told himself she would stay home. He had counted on it. Her presence, her laughter, the way she sat at that table like she had every right to be there, felt like a direct challenge to everything he had already decided. He walked with long, deliberate strides, weaving between tables, his jaw set. Maigret followed 2 steps behind, reading his mood, saying nothing. He reached Mia's table without slowing down, without a single word, without any warning at all. He reached across, picked up the bowl of hot soup sitting at her place setting, and poured it directly over her body. The room fell silent. Hot soup ran through her hair, down her forehead, across her cheeks, dripping from her chin onto the white tablecloth and pooling in her lap. The heat of it spread fast. Her burgundy gown soaked through immediately, dark patches spreading across her shoulders and down her back. The woman beside her lurched backward, knocking her chair. Someone across the table grabbed the edge of the linen. Mia did not move. She sat perfectly still, hands in her lap, eyes forward. She did not reach up. She did not wipe her face. She did not make a single sound. Anderson set the empty bowl down on the table. He straightened his jacket. Then he looked down at her like she was something he had already finished with. "I told you." His voice was low, but the silence in the room carried it easily to every corner. "I told you clearly you don't belong here. This company isn't for nobody, an orphan like you." He tilted his head slightly. "Did you think that didn't apply to you?" Mia said nothing. Anderson turned and extended his hand. Maigret stepped forward and took it, sliding to his side smoothly, like she had been rehearsing this exact moment. "Since everyone is here tonight," Anderson said, raising his voice to the room now, not just to her, "let me make something clear." He looked at Maigret, then back at the surrounding tables. "This is Maigret." My fiancé. We are getting married." His eyes dropped back to Mia. "Mia and I are over a long time ago. I'm marrying Margaret once the divorce is finalized." Anderson turned to face Margaret, then pressed his lips on Margaret's forehead. The room gasps. Mia looked up at him. Soup was still running down the side of her face. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her back was straight. Her eyes held his without flinching, without pleading, without anything that gave him what he was looking for. She said nothing, not one word, and that silence, unbroken, steady, and completely controlled, unsettled the room more than any scream could have. People looked away from her because they could not hold it, because her stillness in that moment was not the stillness of a woman who was defeated. It was something else entirely, something that made the air in the room feel different. Then the main doors opened. Victor Laurent walked in. The room reacted before anyone understood why. Whatever conversations had begun to recover dropped again instantly. Several people near the entrance rose from their seats without thinking. Victor moved through the ballroom slowly, taking in everything around him with the unhurried calm of a man who has never once needed to prove he was the most important person in a room. His eyes swept the space once and then settled, completely, without moving, on the scene before him. The table. The woman sitting perfectly still with soup soaking through her gown and running down her face. Anderson standing over her with an empty bowl beside him and Maigret on his arm. Anderson saw him. Something crossed his face in an instant, a brief flicker of recalculation, and then he covered it smoothly, straightened to his full height, and turned toward Victor with the easy confidence of a man who believed he was reporting good news. "Sir." He gestured casually toward Mia. "Don't concern yourself with this. I was just removing a rotten bug from the company. Something that should have been dealt with a long time ago." 6 years earlier, Mia had just started working at Oryx Holdings when she met Anderson. She arrived early, notebook in hand, meticulously organized, every page filled with notes she had rewritten 3 times. He watched her from across the room, fascinated by the focus in her eyes, the way her pen moved like it could capture the world. After the 3rd week, he approached her during lunch, complimented her on her insight, and asked if she wanted to celebrate landing her role with a small dinner. She laughed softly, half surprised, half charmed, and agreed. Mia was 25, he was 28. Their days quickly became a rhythm. He called every morning, reminding her of meetings, giving tips, checking in on her projects. Their evenings were quiet, spent exploring the city, cooking together in their tiny apartment, or simply talking about dreams too big to say out loud. 6 months later, they were dating, and a year after that, they married in a sunlit chapel with just a few close friends and family. Their first home was a rented 2-bedroom apartment with thin walls and a kitchen that fit 1 person comfortably and 2 people if neither of them moved too quickly. A year into their marriage, Mia gave birth to their daughter, Lillian Carter, a small bundle of energy who stole both their hearts immediately. Nights were sleepless, but full of whispered promises, soft lullabies, and the kind of love that quietly filled every corner of their tiny home. They built their life carefully. They managed their finances, cooked together, go for vacations, go on dates, love each other, love their daughter, and love like a real family. 4 years into their marriage, a letter arrived on a Saturday afternoon while Mia was home alone with Lillian. It came from a law firm's return address she didn't recognize. She opened it at the kitchen table while Lillian napped. It was from a firm acting on behalf of a man named Victor Laurent. It said he had been searching for his granddaughter for many years. That through orphanage records and a private investigator, they believed they had found her. that if she was willing, Mr. Laurent would very much like to meet her. She read it twice, left for 1 week, picked up the letter, and read it the following weekend. Then she called the number at the bottom. She met Victor 2 weeks later. Victor was 72, silver-haired, with a quietness about him that came not from timidity, but from a man who had learned that the people who spoke least in a room usually understood it best. When she walked in, he stood up from his desk and stayed standing, and the expression on his face stopped her mid-step. It was not the expression of a man conducting a meeting. It was the expression of a man who had been searching for something for a very long time and was looking at it right now. Mia's parents had been young, deeply in love, and caught in the crossfire of a business rivalry that had turned violent. When she was 4 months old, an attack aimed at Victor's operations had killed both of her parents. A woman who worked in the household had taken the baby to a nearby orphanage, believing it was the safest thing she could do. Victor had been in hospital at the time, battling a heart condition, and did not know the child existed until 6 months later when he finally learned the full story of what had happened that night. By then, she had already been placed with a foster family. By the time the legal process began, the records had been transferred across multiple districts, and the trail kept going cold. Every time Victor's team came close, something went wrong. A sealed file, a transferred record, a foster placement that had moved cities. He never stopped looking for her. But he never got the chance until 3 weeks ago when he received a call from his lawyer informing him of a DNA match from the hospital where Mia had donated blood for a patient. Mia sat across from him and listened to all of it and felt something move through her that she had no word for. Not grief, exactly. Not joy. Something large and quiet that settled in her chest like an answer. She had been carrying the question for her entire life. Then Victor folded his hands on the desk and looked at her directly. "You are Mia Laurent, my granddaughter, the sole heir of Oryx Holdings." He paused. "The company, properties, the investment portfolio, all of it belongs to you by blood and by law. I had it documented years ago on the chance that I found you." She was quiet. "Oryx Holdings," she said. "Yes. And I'd love you to start training to take over the company. I want to make this official and reveal who you are to the world." She had worked here for 3 years, filed correspondence for offices 3 floors up, eaten lunch in the cafeteria, all while the man who owned it had been looking for her. She went home that evening and sat across from Anderson at dinner and watched him talk about his day and thought about telling him. She opened her mouth once. Then she closed it. She went back to Victor 3 more times over the following 2 weeks, asking questions, understanding the full picture of what was being offered to her. On the 4th visit, she sat down and said, "I don't want the announcement. I have a life I built myself, a husband I love, and a daughter who is happy. I want to keep that." Victor studied her. "And when the time comes that you need it, I'll be ready," she said. "But not now." Victor studied her for a long moment after she said it. The quietness in him did not change, but something behind his eyes shifted slightly, the way a man shifts when he has accepted a decision he does not entirely agree with. "I understand," he said. "I won't push you." He paused. "But I want to ask you something. Your husband, Anderson Carter, he works here." She looked at him. "Yes. I had my team pull his file when I learned who you had married." Victor folded his hands on the desk. "He has been due for a promotion for some time. His performance record is solid. The only reason it hasn't moved forward is that the criteria hadn't aligned with the available positions. That changes this quarter." He looked at her carefully. "I would like to give him the managing director position. The promotion would come with a new apartment, a car, and a salary increase. I want to make sure you and Lillian are properly taken care of, even if you won't let me do it directly." Mia was quiet for a moment. "Does he deserve it on his own merit?" "His file supports it," Victor said. "I would not offer it otherwise." "Then yes," she said. "But it goes through the proper process. No special treatment. No one tells him it came from me." Victor nodded. "He will receive a letter from the board. It will say the promotion came with a recommendation from someone the company highly regards. Nothing more." She looked at her grandfather across the desk. This man she had known for 3 weeks, who was already trying to take care of her in every way she would allow, and felt something in her chest that she had no name for yet. "Thank you," she said quietly. 2 weeks later, Anderson came home that evening and lifted her off her feet in the kitchen, laughing in a way she hadn't heard from him in months. Managing director. New salary. A company residence in one of the city's most prestigious places. A car. Direct board access. Effective immediately. Managing director, Mia. "Can you believe it?" he said, still holding her, still laughing. "They said it came with a recommendation from someone the company highly regards. I don't even know who. But this is it, Mia. Everything I've been working toward. All those late nights. All that time I put in, it finally paid off." She wrapped her arms around him. "You earned it," she said. They moved into the company residence on a Friday afternoon, Lillian on Anderson's shoulders laughing at the ceiling height, Mia standing in the center of the living room, turning slowly, taking in the space, the wide windows, the marble floors, the kitchen that fit more than 2 people comfortably. It was more than they had ever had. Evenings were quiet and warm. Mia cooking while Anderson leaned against the counter, stealing tastes of the food, Lillian crawling between their legs, giggling, whispered talks about dreams, fears, and hopes too big to speak aloud. For 3 months, they existed in a bubble of joy, love quietly stitching itself into every corner of their life. Then the meetings started running late. It was gradual at first, the way all erosion is gradual. He called to say he'd been held up. She kept his food warm. He came home tired and distracted, and she gave him space because she understood ambition, and she respected his. 6 months into the managing director role, late nights had become the pattern rather than the exception. He stopped sitting with her after dinner. He stopped asking about Lillian's day. Then the complaints began. One evening he pushed his plate aside and said, "This isn't like you, Mia. The food is salty." She looked at him. "I made it the same way I always make it." "It's salty," he said, and left the table. The next week it was the house. The place looked scattered. "Can you not keep things in order?" Then he stopped eating at home altogether. "I ate with a client," he'd say, walking past the kitchen without looking at her. Days passed when she barely saw him. Then days became stretches of nights where he didn't come home at all. One night he walked in past Midnight Margaret, his new personal assistant. "This is Margaret," he said, setting his keys on the counter. "My personal assistant. We had a late meeting and it ran too long for her to go home safely. She'll stay the night." Mia stood in the hallway and looked at this woman. Margaret was tall, polished, with the kind of ease that came from a life where doors had always opened easily. She smiled at Mia with warmth that felt rehearsed, and then looked past her toward the sound of Lillian stirring in the bedroom. "Is that your daughter?" She pointed at a picture on the wall. "I've heard so much about her. She looks so sweet." That day, Margaret slept in the guest room. Margaret came back the following week. Then the week after. Sometimes she called ahead, sometimes she simply appeared, always with something for Lillian. A toy, a book, a bag of sweets. She would crouch down to Lillian's level and smile, and Lillian, who trusted everyone who smiled at her, smiled back. Anderson watched these visits and said nothing. Then Margaret started adjusting things. She moved a vase in the entryway one afternoon without asking, rearranged the cushions on the sofa, commented that the dining chairs would look better against the other wall. When Mia's face tightened, Maugret touched her arm and said softly, "I'm sorry, I just thought it might look better this way." But Anderson looked at the rearranged cushions and said, "Actually, that looks good. Leave it." He began asking Mia to cook things Maugret had mentioned in passing. She said you should try adding less oil. Do it that way. The one time Mia pushed back, Anderson's voice rose immediately. "Why do you always do this? She is trying to help our family, and you make everything difficult." Mia said nothing else that evening. Then Maugret started posting pictures from Anderson's meetings, the two of them at restaurant tables, at company events, at places that had nothing to do with work. Then a photo of Lillian on Maugret's lap with the caption, "My daughter." Mia sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the photo without moving. 3 weeks later, a second one appeared. Lillian, Anderson, and Maugret at a children's fair. Maugret was fixing Lillian's hair ribbon, Lillian looking up at her with complete and uncomplicated trust. She wrote the caption, "Family first, always." Anderson had kept Mia busy with work at the office. Then, he took their daughter out with Maugret. It hurts Mia, but she filed it away because she could see that her daughter was happy. Soon Lillian started calling her Maggie. Mia found this out from Lillian one evening while braiding her hair. Lillian said it the way children say things that mean nothing to them and everything to the person listening, casually, cheerfully, without any awareness of the weight of it. "I love Auntie Maggie. She says I have the prettiest hair," Lillian said. Mia's hands kept moving, section over section. "Steady." "Does she?" she said. "She bought me a new doll. Daddy says she's his very special friend." Mia nodded even though it got to her. She filed it away thinking they would get tired and stop. But they didn't stop. Instead, they got better at it. Colleagues began talking. Mia heard it in the pauses when she entered rooms, in the way people looked at her and looked away. When Mia raised Margaret's matter with Anderson again, he leaned back and looked at her like she was a problem he had already solved. "It's time for you to resign," he said. "Resign and stay at home. I'll take care of this family. You're not cut out for office work, Mia. Just stay home with Lillian. It's becoming a problem having you in the same building." Mia thought he was joking at first, but the look on his face made her believe he was serious. "I won't resign," she said. Anderson said nothing again, but his face hardened. From that day, he started giving her loads of tasks outside her role, corrected her in front of colleagues, made comments about a task, and made her invisible in every room she had once belonged to. Tasks that kept her at the office late. "You irritate me," he told her one day at the general meeting. Life becomes unbearable for her at work. People began talking about her, making side comments about how she should leave the company. Anderson stopped sending money for upkeeps, stopped eating at home, stopped looking at her. One night, Anderson came home drunk after 2 weeks of not coming home. He leaned against the doorframe, and she guided him inside with his arm over her shoulder. His phone slipped from his pocket. The screen lit up. She saw a preview of a message before she could stop herself. "Didn't you say you'd get Mia to sign the divorce papers? I want to move in with you, Ander." She set him down on the sofa, picked up the phone, and read the message. She discovered they've been seeing each other for 6 months. Bring sleeping in expensive hotels. Go on vacations disguised as business trips. Large transfers from their joint account funding Maugret's rent, her wardrobe, her lifestyle. Then the conversations about their divorce and Lillian's custody. Mia's hands were shaking by the time she set the phone down. Mia couldn't sleep that night. She cried for the pain. She cried for her marriage that had ended months ago and for all she had sacrificed for the man she loved but never loved her back. 2 days later, Mia was looking for a document Anderson had texted her to bring. He had left the document in a folder in his home office. Mia was about to take it when she saw something. It was a divorce papers. She found the documents in the bottom drawer of his home office. Divorce papers already drafted and signed by Anderson. Then she saw letters from 2 doctors she had never met. They described her as emotionally unstable, financially unreliable, and a negligible presence in the home. Attached was a custody petition seeking full parental rights for Anderson, citing the mother's mental health as the grounds. Below that was a psychiatric evaluation with her name on the cover, an appointment date she had never attended, a doctor's signature she had never seen. Every word of it was invented, declaring her depressed, emotionally unfit, a risk to her own child. And beneath those were company documents, transfers, forged authorizations, funds moved from Oryx Holdings into private accounts. She sat on the floor of that office with the documents spread around her and let herself cry. Fully, completely, without holding any of it back. She cried until her chest hurt and her eyes were swollen and the room was silent except for her breathing. Then she wiped her face. She gathered every document, took pictures of each, then stacked them carefully. She stood up, walked to the bedroom, and picked up her phone and called Victor Laurent. Victor answered on the first ring. Her voice was steady and calm. "Grandfather," she said, "I'm ready." She did not cry while she was on the phone. She did not cry when she ended the call. She just began to make plans. The next 6 months were the most disciplined of her life. She smiled at Anderson over breakfast. She asked about his meetings. She stopped asking why he came home late. Stopped asking why he smelled of Margaret's perfume. She packed Lillian's bag for the weekend outings she was not invited to and waved from the doorway with a pleasant face. She performed the role so thoroughly that Anderson stopped being careful. He left his phone on the counter. He stopped lowering his voice on calls. He had decided she was helpless, and helpless people did not need to be managed. That belief was the most expensive mistake he ever made. Every afternoon while he was at the office, Mia was somewhere else entirely. She sat with Victor and learned Oryx Holdings from the ground up. Governance, board structure, financial architecture, asset holdings, subsidiary operations. She took notes the way she had always taken notes, like the words mattered more than anything else in the room. She met with lawyers who traced every forged transaction and built a file that was clean and complete and devastating. She met with forensic accountants who followed the money through every shell account and came back with a report that left nothing unexplained. She gathered everything. She handed it to people who knew exactly what to do with it, and she told them when she wanted it used. Victor told her once, midway through a governance session, that she had the sharpest mind he had encountered in 30 years of building this company. "You get that from your father," he said. He paused, then reached into the drawer of his desk and pulled out a photograph. He held it across the table to her. Matthew was the same way. Precise. Patient. He could walk into any room and understand it before anyone else had finished speaking. Mia took the photograph carefully. A young man and a young woman, standing close together outside a building she didn't recognize, both of them laughing at something just outside the frame. The woman had Mia's eyes. The man had her jawline, her posture, the way he held himself with quiet certainty. She didn't speak for a moment. "And your mother," Victor said softly. "Harper was the kindest person I ever knew. She saw the good in everyone before they had earned it. You have that too. Even now, after everything, you still have that." Mia looked at the photograph for a long time. At her mother's face. At her father's hands. at the two people who had existed and loved each other and never got the chance to know her. "Can I keep this?" she asked. "It was always yours," Victor said. She nodded slowly. Something moved through her chest that she had no word for. Not grief, not joy, but the particular ache of receiving something you waited your whole life for and never let yourself believe would actually come. She set the photograph down gently on the desk and looked up at Victor. His eyes were bright and steady and full of something he had been holding for 24 years. "Can I hug you?" she asked. Victor's composure, which had held through every meeting, every session, every conversation since the day she walked into his home, broke quietly and completely. His eyes filled. He stood from his chair and came around the desk, and she met him halfway, and he held onto her the way a man holds onto something he stopped letting himself hope for. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing that needed to be said. After a long moment, she stepped back, wiped her eyes once, and sat back down. She picked up her pen. She looked at him steadily. "Where were we?" she said. Victor laughed softly, settled back into his chair, and continued. The weeks that followed were the final stretch of preparation. Everything was in place. The lawyers had what they needed. She had studied every division of Oryx Holdings until she could speak to any of it without hesitation. She was ready in every way that mattered. Then the invitation arrived. The Oryx Holdings Annual Awards Gala. 300 guests. Every board member, every senior partner, every investor, every person in the city who had shaken Anderson's hand and believed the version of himself he had sold to them were invited. On the night of the gala, she dressed slowly in front of the bedroom mirror. She chose the burgundy gown. She styled her hair carefully. She put on the simple jewelry she had always preferred. Nothing that announced itself. Nothing that needed to. She looked at her reflection for a long time. Not with vanity, with recognition. The woman looking back at her was not the woman who had sat on the floor of Anderson's home office with documents spread around her, crying until she had nothing left. That woman had done her crying. This woman had done her work. She picked up her clutch, checked that everything she needed was inside, and walked out the door. She arrived at the Grand Oryx Ballroom before Anderson. She found her table near the center of the room and sat with her colleagues and let herself laugh, genuinely, fully, because the weight she had been carrying for 6 months was almost, finally, about to be set down. She wore the burgundy gown. Her jewelry was simple. She looked like a woman who belonged exactly where she was sitting, because she did. Then the doors opened and Anderson walked in with Maigret on his arm, and he saw her laughing, and his face changed. Mia had seen Anderson get angry over the past 5 years of their marriage, but the look on his face was quite different when she saw him. It looks murderous, like he was ready to kill her. She remembered how Anderson had threatened to make her regret it if she did not stop coming to work. Mia had filed it away as always, but what she didn't expect was that he would pour hot soup on her at the gala. Victor did not respond to Anderson. He did not look at him. He did not acknowledge the words or the casual gesture or the confidence behind them. He looked at Mia, sitting at the center table with soup soaking through her gown and running down the side of her face. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked forward. Not toward Anderson, not toward the stage, directly to Mia's table. He moved through the room without hurrying, and the room parted for him the way rooms part for people who have never had to ask. He reached into his breast pocket and produced a clean white handkerchief and held it out to her without a word. Anderson watched this, and his expression shifted. He looked between Victor and Mia, trying to find the thread of something he was not yet understanding. He kept the confident expression in place, but the edges of it had loosened in a way he hadn't intended and couldn't fully pull back. Mia looked up at Victor. Something passed between them, quiet and brief, and understood only by the two of them. She took the handkerchief. She pressed it once against her face. Then she folded it carefully and held it in her hand. Then she placed both palms flat on the table. And she stood up. She rose without rushing, without drama, without any performance at all. She simply stood, fully and completely, and the room responded to it before anyone could explain why. The few conversations that had quietly tried to resume fell silent again. Chairs shifted. A waiter near the side wall stopped walking mid-step and stayed exactly where he was. 300 people who had just watched a woman humiliated in front of them were now watching that same woman stand up in a ruined gown like she was the only person in the room with somewhere to be. Anderson stared at her. "Get out, Mia."
His voice was lower now.
The performance was still in it, but it was working harder than before. "This is not the time or the place to display your stupidity." Anderson. Victor said his name. Once. Quietly. The way you say the name of someone who has said enough. Anderson closed his mouth and turned to face Victor. Victor turned to face the room. The silence that followed was the most complete silence the Grand Oryx Ballroom had produced all evening. The orchestra was still. The waitstaff was still. 300 people sat or stood with their full attention on the silver-haired man standing at the center of the room, and not one of them moved. "I want to thank all of you for being here tonight," Victor began. His voice was even and unhurried, and it reached every corner of the room without effort. "Many of you have worked alongside this company for years. You have watched it grow. You have contributed to what it has become, and I am grateful for that."
He paused.
"What none of you know is that for the past 2 years, I have been keeping something close. Something personal. Something that ends tonight." The room stirred. Quiet murmurs moved between tables. "I have a granddaughter," Victor said, "and this gala is organized because of her." The murmurs spread immediately, moving faster now. "Her parents were killed when she was 4 months old. I spent 24 years searching for her. Every year, every lead, every dead end." His voice did not waver. 3 years ago, I found her. She had been working in this building the entire time, right here, among you, filing correspondence, attending meetings, doing her job with a discipline and a precision that I now understand she was born with.
He paused and let that land.
"Her real name is Aurelia Lauron, and she has been sitting in this room with you for years without a single person knowing who she truly was." The murmurs became something louder. Anderson turned slowly, scanning the room, looking for someone he didn't know. Then his eyes found Mia, standing still, looking directly at him. And the understanding crossed his face like a door slamming shut. Mia looked at him. Her expression had not changed. Still steady. Still composed. Still giving him absolutely nothing. But her eyes held something now that he had not seen in 6 years of marriage, and it stopped him the way a locked door stops a man who has always had the key. This was not the look of a woman who was hurt. This was not the look of a woman who was angry. This was the look of a woman who had finished something. Victor moved closer to Mia and held her hand. He didn't mind that the soup had stained her gown. He did not care that 300 people in the hall looked at her pitifully just minutes ago. He simply stood beside her and held her hand. "This is my granddaughter, Aurelia Lauron, who you all know as Mia Carter." "Sir, this is not possible," Anderson started, his voice slightly wrong. "Mia has no family. She grew up in foster care. She is nobody." "The DNA confirmation was completed 8 months ago," Victor said without looking at him. "The legal documentation has been on file for 2 years. There is nothing here to dispute. Anderson looked at Mia as if seeing her for the first time in his life. His eyes moved over her face, searching for something familiar that now felt entirely foreign. The woman he had dismissed, humiliated, tried to erase, standing beside the most powerful man in the room, her hand in his, her back straight, her expression giving nothing away. "This is not possible," Anderson said again, but the conviction had left the words completely. "She's my wife, no, my ex-wife. She is mentally unstable. She cannot be your granddaughter. She's just—" He stopped. He looked around the room. Nobody was nodding. Nobody was agreeing. Every face he found was looking back at him with an expression he had never seen directed at him before. "She's just—" Victor raised his hand, and Anderson went quietly. Margaret stood frozen beside him. Victor looked at Anderson for a long moment before he spoke. When he did, his voice was not loud. It did not need to be. "I know," Victor said. "She was your wife. She told me everything. She told me how she found you, how she loved you, how she chose you over her inheritance, over her identity, over everything that was waiting for her here."
He paused.
"She chose to love you when she could have chosen all of this. And what did you do with that?" He let the question sit in the room. Nobody answered it. Nobody needed to. Victor looked around the room, allowing the words to settle, allowing every person present to sit with the full weight of what had just been said. Then he turned back to the ballroom. "Mia has spent the last 6 months preparing to lead this company," Victor said, addressing the room, not Anderson. "Every division, every board relationship, every operational structure. I have been present for every hour of her training. I have watched her work." He looked around the room slowly. "She has been ready for some time." He paused once more. Effective immediately, Mia Loron is the Chief Executive Officer of Oryx Holdings. The room came apart, not into applause, into the particular noise of 300 people all arriving at the same place at the same time from different directions. Anderson stood in the middle of it and did not move.
"No."
He said it loudly enough to cut through the noise, and the nearest tables went quiet, and the quiet spread.
"No.
This is not how this works. You cannot walk in here and hand a company to someone based on a DNA test and 6 months of training." He looked at Victor with an expression that was trying very hard to be composed, and was no longer managing it.
"Sir."
"I have been running this company for 2 years. I have built relationships. I have delivered results that this company had not seen before my appointment. You cannot simply remove me because—" "Anderson." Victor looked directly at him. "How do you think you became the managing director of this company?" Anderson stopped. "You didn't think it was based on your records alone, did you?" Victor continued. "You became the managing director because Mia recommended you. She told me you could do it. She told me she loved the life she had built with you and wanted to remain in that life. So she stepped back from everything that was rightfully hers and chose you. She gave you the position. She gave you the residence. She gave you the car, the salary, the access, the authority. Every single thing you have called your achievement for the past 2 years, she handed to you." He paused. "And what did you do with it?" Anderson's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The question hung in the air between them, and the room was so quiet that it seemed to hang there for everyone. Victor nodded toward the far side of the room. The screens lit up. 2 large screens that had been dark all evening came on at the same moment. Documents filled them. Transaction records, bank statements, transfer authorizations. 14 months of company funds moved through shell accounts into private accounts. The amounts were significant. The trail was meticulous. clean and complete, and there was nowhere inside it to hide. "You falsified records," Victor said, his voice steady and measured, each word placed carefully. "You forged signatures. You authorized transactions that never passed through the proper channels. You transferred funds from this company's accounts to fund your lifestyle and your mistress, while Mia, the true owner of everything you were spending, went without. You isolated her. You humiliated her in front of her colleagues. You told the world she was mentally unstable. And then you built a paper trail of fabricated documents to take her child from her." A second set of documents appeared on the screens. Divorce papers already drafted and signed by Anderson. A custody petition. Psychiatric evaluations with Mia's name on the cover. Appointment dates she had never attended. A doctor she had never met. Clinical findings that described a woman none of the people in that room would have recognized as the one standing before them. "You tried to erase the woman who gave you everything," Victor said. "The woman who is the sole heir of this company. The woman whose name was on this building long before yours ever was." The room was completely silent. Anderson looked at the screens. He looked at them the way a man looks at something he buried very carefully and genuinely cannot believe has been found. Not with outrage. Not with the sharp, immediate protest of an innocent man. With something slower and heavier. The look of a man watching the floor beneath him give way and understanding, in real time, that there is nothing underneath it. "These are fabricated," he said. His voice had lost almost everything now. The authority, the ease, the performance he had carried into every room for 3 years. What was left was thin and unconvincing, and every person in that ballroom heard the difference between what it used to sound like and what it sounded like right now. "Someone has put this together to discredit me. This is a setup. I don't know what she has." The forensic audit was conducted by an independent firm, Victor said. The full report is 52 pages. It has already been submitted to the appropriate authorities. Anderson turned. Near the side entrance of the ballroom, 2 men in dark suits stood watching him. He recognized them. His face went the color of the tablecloths. Maigret, who had been standing 2 steps to his left since Victor entered the room, took 1 step backward. Then another. She was looking for the edge of the crowd with her eyes, for a gap to move through, for somewhere to put herself that was not beside the man whose forehead she had let kiss her in front of 300 people. A board member near her shifted slightly, and she moved through the space, without being invited. Nobody followed her. Nobody said her name. Nobody looked at her at all. The guests who had shaken Anderson's hand at the door, who had congratulated him before the evening had even properly started, were looking at him now the way people look when they realize they have been performing admiration for someone who did not deserve it and are quietly, privately, deciding what to do with that information. Anderson felt the room turn. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Steadily. Completely. The way a room turns when the truth arrives, and there is no longer any version of events that holds together. He felt it move through the space table by table, face by face, and there was nothing he could do to stop it because he had spent 3 years building a reputation on a foundation that was never his, and the foundation had just been pulled out from under him in front of everyone who had ever believed in it. He looked at Mia. She walked toward him, not with anger, not with triumph. Steadily, like a woman who had decided something and was completing the action. She stopped in front of him, close enough that the room heard every word, but it felt like something passing between only the 2 of them. She looked at him for a long moment without speaking. She looked at the face she had loved for 6 years. The face that had cried in a hospital room holding their daughter. She looked at what that face had become, tight and cornered and stripped of every layer it had hidden behind, and she felt something she had not expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not anger.
Grief.
Clean and final. The grief of a woman who had loved something real and was watching the last of it end. "I chose you," she said. Her voice was the steadiest it had ever been. "I had a grandfather. I had a company. I had a name and a legacy and a life I had never touched, and I set all of it aside because I chose you. I stayed small so you could feel big. I stayed quiet so you could feel heard. I handed you everything you have ever stood on, and I watched you call it your own." She paused. Let the silence hold. I would have kept choosing you, Anderson. I would have chosen you for the rest of my life if you had only, she stopped. One breath. But you chose to erase me instead. Anderson's mouth opened. Nothing came. Not one word. Not one defense. Not one version of a response that would work in this room, in this moment, in front of these people. The man who had walked into this ballroom minutes ago performing his power over a woman he believed had nothing was standing in the wreckage of everything he had built on a foundation she had put there with her own hands. He looked at her, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she saw it. Behind the cornered expression, behind the stripped confidence, behind everything he had become in 2 years of arrogance and cruelty, she saw the man from the park bench. And then it was gone. 3 men from the side entrance moved forward. They did not rush. They did not hesitate. They walked with the quiet certainty of men who already knew how this would end. One of them stopped in front of Anderson. For a brief second, Anderson did not move. It was as if his body had not yet caught up with what his mind already understood. His eyes flicked once toward the doors.
Toward the crowd.
Toward Mia. There was nowhere to go. The officer reached for his wrist. The sharp click of metal closing around bone cut through the ballroom like a blade. "Mr. Anderson Carter," the officer said, his voice calm, official, leaving no room for interruption. "You are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, forgery, financial misconduct, and conspiracy to commit custodial interference." A second click. His other wrist was secured. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." Anderson finally reacted. Not with strength, not with anger, with desperation. "This is a mistake," he started, his voice cracking in a way it never had before. "You don't understand." "I didn't." The officer did not respond, did not look at him, did not acknowledge him at all, because there was nothing left to understand. Behind him, Maigret let out a small, broken sound. The second officer had reached her. She had backed herself against the edge of a table without realizing it, her hands slightly raised as if that alone could stop what was happening. Her composure, the careful poise, the polished confidence, the effortless smile she had worn into every room, had completely collapsed. "I didn't do anything," she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "I didn't sign anything. I didn't know where the money came from. He handled everything. I was just—" "Ms. Maigret Smith," the officer cut in, his tone just as even, just as final. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, aiding and abetting financial fraud, and receipt of illicit funds." Her lips trembled. "I didn't know," she whispered, but the room heard it. Not as truth, as fear. The handcuffs closed around her wrists. She flinched at the sound. For a moment, she looked toward Anderson. Not with love. Not even with loyalty. With blame. But Anderson was no longer looking at her.
He was looking at Mia.
Wait, Mia said calmly. The officers paused. The room held its breath again. Mia took one step closer. Soup still stained her gown. She looked at Anderson. Directly.
Steadily.
I want to add one more charge, she said. The officer beside him turned slightly toward her. Mia did not take her eyes off Anderson. For what he just did tonight. A small pause. Long enough for the room to remember.
The bowl. The heat.
The silence that followed. Pouring hot soup on someone is not humiliation, she continued, her voice calm, precise, and impossibly controlled. It is assault. Attempted bodily harm. Her gaze did not waver. If the temperature had been higher, it would have caused permanent damage. Disfigurement. So yes. Now her voice dropped slightly. Not softer.
Sharper.
I will be pressing charges for attempted murder. The words landed heavier than anything that had been said all night. Not because of the volume. Because of the certainty. Anderson froze. Whatever he had been about to say died in his throat. He stared at her like he didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him, not because of her name, not because of her power, but because of the complete absence of hesitation in her eyes. This was not the woman who had stayed silent at the table. This was the woman who had decided. The officer gave a short nod. It will be added to the report. The officers turned them both toward the exit. The room parted again. But this time it was different.
No admiration.
No respect.
No anticipation.
Only distance. Only silence. Only the unmistakable shift of 300 people stepping back from something they wanted no part of. The same man who had walked into the ballroom like he owned it was now being walked out of it in handcuffs, his shoulders no longer straight, his presence no longer filling the room, reduced, in the span of minutes, to exactly what he had tried to make her feel like. Nothing. Maugret stumbled once as they moved, the heel of her shoe catching against the edge of the carpet. The officer steadied her without gentleness, without cruelty, just procedure. They did not look back. The doors opened, then closed. And just like that, they were gone. The weeks that followed moved quickly. Anderson was charged with fraud, forgery, misappropriation of company funds, and the production of false legal documents. The charges were substantial and the evidence behind them was airtight. His attorney filed for delays. The court granted none that mattered. He was remanded, and the proceedings began. The custody hearing came 3 weeks after the gala. The family court judge reviewed the fabricated psychiatric reports, the forensic audit findings, the forged authorizations, and 2 years of financial records. Anderson's petition for full custody, built on documents that described a woman who did not exist, was dismissed. Mia was granted full custody of Lillian. Mia moved in with her grandfather. He lives in the big Laurent mansion alone, and she wanted to bond with the only family she had left. Lillian loved her room at the mansion. The company residence given to Anderson was returned. The car was returned. Every material thing that had arrived with the promotion Mia had quietly arranged for the man she loved was reclaimed, one piece at a time, in the weeks that followed. 6 weeks after the gala, Mia sat at the head of the boardroom table on the 32nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread out beneath a clear morning sky. 12 board members arranged around the table watching her with the focused attention of people who had voted for something and were now seeing it begin. She looked around the table. She thought about the 4th floor. The narrow desk, the desk line that rang every morning with tips she hadn't asked for. She thought about the cream walls and the kitchen and Lillian laughing in the next room. She thought about a home office floor in the dark, crying until there was nothing left. She thought about all the choosing she had done. Then she opened the folder in front of her, looked up at the 12 people waiting, and said, "Let's begin." In the prison, Anderson lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling and thought about Lillian laughing on his shoulders the day they moved into the residence. He thought about Mia walking herself down the aisle with her chin level and her back straight. He thought about everything she had handed him and everything he had called his own. He had mistaken her stillness for weakness. He understood now, too late and too completely, that it was never weakness. It was patience. And she had been patient enough to watch him destroy himself. Mia picked Lillian up from school herself, the way she had done every single day since the night everything changed. Lillian ran across the courtyard the way she always ran, with her whole body, bag bouncing, laces undone, no hesitation at all. Mia crouched down and caught her. "How was your day?" she said. "Good," Lillian said into her shoulder. "We drew pictures." "I drew you." Mia pulled back. "Can I see?" Lillian dug into her bag and produced a folded piece of paper. Mia opened it carefully. A woman in a purple dress, standing very tall, with yellow lines coming from her in every direction. Lillian had been drawing light around the things she loved since she was 3 years old. "That's you," Lillian said, with the complete certainty of a child stating a fact so obvious it barely needed saying. "Because you're the brightest person I know, Mummy." Mia looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it into her bag, took Lillian's hand, and walked to the car. The city moved around them. The evening was warm and unhurried. Lillian talked all the way to the car about her friends, a song, a book she wanted, a game she had played at lunch. Everything and nothing and all of it is important. Mia listened to every word, and the weight she had carried for 2 years, through every late night and every cruel word, and every morning she had smiled at a man who was quietly destroying her. That weight was gone. She was just a mother walking with her daughter through a warm evening, holding her hand, going home. And home, for the first time in a very long time, was exactly where she wanted to be. True strength is not measured by the power you hold over others, but by the patience, integrity, and resilience you show when the world tries to break you. Choosing yourself and your values, even in silence, lays the foundation for justice, growth, and a life reclaimed. If you loved Mia's journey of resilience and triumph, don't forget to like, comment your favorite moment, and subscribe for more gripping stories like this. Thank you for watching.